Welcome to Spacevidcast, episode 227 for Friday, July.
Really?
You know what?
Sure.
We have invented a time machine.
Friday, July 42nd?
2047.
Who cares?
It's for Friday, August 21st, 2009. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me is beautiful, lovely, wonderful, talented, and incredibly wearing a white shirt on camera, Carrie Ann Higginbotham. That is a no-no in video.
Whatever.
You knew that.
Yes,
We are your Space Vidcasters. We have got an action-packed episode for you tonight, rather than do our normal space news type thing, because, you know, we've been doing those dailies. Space news, we've been doing the dailies. You guys have been watching the dailies. You've been enjoying the dailies, and you can get a daily dose.
Some of you have. Then some of you have been complaining about the dailies. But, you know, other than that, we're
Who's
good.
been complaining?
Well, I'm not going to say anything about, you know, music too loud or anything like that.
Oh, I see how it's going, people. You can get your Space Vidcast daily episodes. It gives you just a quick little 2-minute snippet of all the news happening, or the news happening that day in space, and just kind of neat things going on. But we have got an in-studio, our first ever in-studio guest.
Crazy.
I don't know what to do. The author of the Twitter Workbook, all-around great guy. I cannot speak tonight, so I'm just going to hand it over. David, it's Haslam? Haslam?
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
He's English.
Got it. You know, this is an interesting interview because, you know, we're a space show, so why are we interviewing you about the Twitter Workbook, available now on Amazon.com?
Because David interviewed us for the book.
That's a good point. So actually, let's back up. You're wearing your University of Mars shirt, so this will come full circle into space. But let's start with the Twitter aspect, because we're all about social media and getting the word out using different avenues. So how did this book even come about?
It started in a universe a long time ago, a galaxy far,
Uh-oh.
far away.
Oh no, I saw that coming.
No, I'm not doing the George Lucas thing at all. I have been planning to write books since I was 10 years old. In fact, the first book I was planning when I was 10 was a science fiction book based in Dayton, Ohio, on the day Neil Armstrong landed on the moon.
Nice.
Because the aliens figured the whole planet Earth was distracted enough so they could do things.
That's actually
everybody was looking one way.
Careful. You're giving away some golden ideas here.
That's right.
I'm right there with
you. The book will come out in the future. On and off since that point in time, I've been thinking different books and different ideas. And around Christmas time of last year, I started work on another book. And in February of this year, I was on Twitter one afternoon, and I came across an author by the name of Jackie Silver. She said, I'm having problems with TweetDeck. I don't understand it. I don't know how it works. Can somebody please explain it to me? So, being the nice guy I am, I said, yes, I'll call you tomorrow morning and we'll talk about it. Got on the phone with her. We talked about TweetDeck for about 10 minutes, and then I said, you've written a book, haven't you? She says, yes.
I want to write one too.
Yes, how did you do that? And how do you make money at it? And how would you go about getting on Amazon.com, et cetera, et cetera? So she spent 35 minutes explaining it all to me, give me some contact people.
Well, let me ask, how long were you on the phone with her, helping her with Twitter?
About 10 minutes.
Oh, so it's a 3-to-1 ratio there.
That's right. That's exactly right. So you guys get to talk for 1 minute and I'll talk for 3. That's how it works every time. Great social media. But she explained how it works and got me in contact with the people that helped her get going. And so I went on my merry way. About 3 weeks later, I was talking to a friend of mine about this book idea I had. And she said, no, David, you need to write a book about something that everybody likes, everybody's interested in, and that you can write about.
Well, and I turned your offer down because I didn't want to do an autobiography. No. I can't help myself.
I like how the friend was like, yeah, I hear your dream, and I reject it.
Exactly. You're like, no, that would fail. Let me tell you what you're going to do instead.
I mean, you know, don't get me wrong.
Spiraling down, crushing the field.
It just was like,
oh, dreadful stuff. So she said to me, why don't you write about Twitter? So that's how the idea got started. That was March 9th of this year.
That's a pretty rapid turnaround to go from I'm going to write about sci-fi to I'm going to write about Twitter to here's a book in print in my hand, available for sale at your favorite bookstore. I'll be doing that throughout the evening, so just so.
Please do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Plug away, plug away.
Yep.
$20 is in this copy down here.
So, is it normal to be able to publish a book that quickly?
By every author I've talked to, no. And especially for a first book, it was 15 weeks from that conversation with my friend to actually being on Amazon.com. 15 weeks.
Wow.
Wow.
So.
That's craziness.
And my printer and distributor couldn't believe it either, because I approved the book. The book got completed on June 15th. Went to my printer by email June 16th, 5 minutes past midnight. I had the book in my hand, the very first copy, which...
That is the first copy right there.
This is the very first book ever. And I've even...
Hot off the presses.
Autographed
Not
it to myself.
so hot anymore.
Yeah.
It's cool though.
To me, well done me.
To me, well done me. That's actually what it says. To me, well done me. Little X's in a smiley face. I love that. 6/18/09.
Yeah. So I got it in my hands 2 days later. And that was a Thursday, and by Saturday, it was on barnesandnoble.com.
Wow.
And the following Tuesday, it was on amazon.com. And my distributor couldn't believe it got on there so quick.
Yeah, I can't believe it got on there that quick either. So. Is it because it's about Twitter? What is this? I mean, the Twitter workbook is obviously about Twitter, but what about Twitter? Because Twitter is such a broad tool that can be used for anything.
Right.
What did you write about?
I wrote mainly about why to use Twitter. Twitter's got a very bad reputation for people signing on, not understanding how to use it, why to use it, and then just letting their accounts lapse. And in fact, I've just found out that if you don't use your Twitter account for 3 months, Twitter can reassign it to somebody else.
I did not know that.
Oh.
And that's fairly new.
I was going to say, yeah, because there have been stuff on there that's like signed on 3 years ago and has 2 tweets and that's it.
You know what's interesting though is you have to come up with the why for Twitter. We have the same problem in space travel though, don't we? You know,
absolutely.
Why should we go to the moon? Why should we go to Mars? This is going to be a very nonlinear discussion. So let's go into a little bit of space because you're a space geek too, right? I mean, that's kind of how we got introduced.
Was it the Mars or bust or onto Mars pins that kind of threw you out there? Just checking.
This is my oh, by the way, first present for the Spacevidcast team.
Oh.
One genuine, real, pretty moth-eaten looking Mars Society Conference lanyard.
But it doesn't say Mars Society on it.
No.
But there's Mars
That's how you know it's from
it's
Mars
red,
Society.
And it's got cat hairs on it from my cats, I think. So whichever one of you wants it, or if you want to give it away to some unlucky guest in some unlucky competition, that's fine by me.
We'll throw in your socks with that one.
Oh my goodness, here. It matches your red chair.
And it's got genuine cat hair on it. Yes. What I did was, when I got the lanyard, I immediately replaced my lanyard with a CMU orientation lanyard. Central Michigan University, where my son just went to. Plug. And the 3 of us volunteered for the conference. So I'm determined to get Cecilia, hello honey. I'm determined to get her indoctrinated into space. So I'm really interested to see how...
I did it to her?
Yes. See, I want to know what your secret ingredient is.
I forced her to do this show.
No.
Fantastic.
It was, you did the first show.
I sucked at it alone.
It was terrible.
That was my secret ingredient.
And I knew you needed me.
Yep. So let's go back to space for a moment.
So,
you know, the same issue with Twitter is the same issue we have in space, which is the why.
Right.
So in your opinion, why should we go to the moon or why should we go to Mars?
Because NASA, unfortunately it's just NASA, and the United States of America have not fulfilled my personal dreams.
What's your personal dreams?
To be able to go into space, into orbit, right now riding a passenger Pan Am
Right.
vehicle.
The old Pan Am animations they had,
that was shown to be flying 8 years ago, according to Stanley Kubrick. 8 years ago, we should have been able to do it. And let me show you this, ladies and gentlemen.
We have props.
I know.
Oh yes, props galore.
Oh
we
my
can never have
gosh.
an in-studio guest because they're not going to ever be this good.
Look at that.
This,
oh my God.
it even smells genuine.
Official research and commendation by NASA, it says on it.
This is correct.
Challenge
This was
the
a birthday, a Christmas present for me that was given to me 10 days approximately after Apollo 17 in 1972.
Wow.
And Apollo 17 was the first Apollo mission I was interested in because it had Harrison Schmitt on board, who was the one and only geologist to fly to the moon. And at the time, I was interested in rocks and fossils more than space.
Right.
But between Harrison Schmitt going to the moon and this book, which outlined my dreams, I got hooked on space.
In detail, no less.
And I will show you how far off they were.
Where they promised me.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna talk about how far off. This is back from the early 70s.
This is
Right,
NASA saying it, though.
Right, this is where NASA
I mean,
thought we'd
this
be
is-
in the early 70s, looking forward 30 to 40 years.
Conclusion.
I don't know how much you can read of this or see this.
None of it. You'll have to read it out
Probably.
loud.
Okay, this guy was the NASA administrator at the time the book was published.
He does
and he
not look
basically...
like a NASA administrator at all.
No, he looks like a...
James Fletcher?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And in here, this paragraph basically says, yes, this is a good outline for the next 20 or 30 years, and we agree with all this, and this is where we should go in the future. Thank you. The only thing in here that they got right is Voyager.
Really?
The Voyager mission is outlined in this book.
Because it was pretty much launched essentially same time.
Well, it was in advanced planning stages, and it was under construction and everything. So they couldn't get it much wrong 5 years distant from this book. But beyond that, let me show you.
Well, I like how it's not necessarily aimed at kids. You know how sometimes they do like, let's do a coloring book.
This is back in the day.
This is more like it's more like a coffee table book. Like they were serious about this. You see what I'm saying?
That's just it. They were oh yeah, that's what I remember. The shots
that's-
of like the
yeah.
space stations and like the Pan Am things that would fly around.
This was supposed to be 1980.
No.
2 space shuttles,
Notice the lack
a
of
space
junk.
station. Yeah.
Yeah.
How there isn't like 3,000 satellites up there. There's like 2.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Well, they got it pretty close. We've got a space station.
Yeah.
We do have at least
But
2
not-
shuttles.
not flying at the same time, though.
No.
Well, no, but they'll be on the pad at the same time.
Yeah, just in case.
Not anymore.
But this is actually a manned interplanetary spacecraft.
They didn't get that one right.
See? See how far we were misled?
But there were several reasons we were misled per se. That is, one of them is you can't sustain the Saturn V model or the Apollo model, excuse me, where you've got a multi-billion-dollar in today's money launch every single time. It just was not sustainable. We had everything but time, and as soon as that ran out, then we had nothing. And so now people look at this and say, well, we need to put a dollar of value on these dollars. Why are we going to the moon? What is there on the moon that we want? Some people say helium-3. Some people say just for exploration, but I haven't heard a really good answer that the general American populace would be able to go to really get behind and be like, you know what? Absolutely, we need to go to the moon. Other than we're humans, we should explore in helium-3. So,
Well, there's the old Space Race 2, Cold
2.0.
War 2,
Yep.
2.0 excuse as well. Because space technology is where the high ground is. It is where the most advanced development goes. Did you know that the computers you're using, our cell phones, a myriad of other things would not have been developed without manned spaceflight? Manned spaceflight. Because after all, computers and robots don't have to look at thin, lightweight screens.
right.
They don't need to have a cell phone.
Right.
They don't, intravenous drug feeds and heart monitors and all these other medical gadgets that have saved millions of lives. Robotic space exploration doesn't need it. So manned space exploration is where the forefront is that is developing technologies to help mankind as a whole benefit.
But we don't see those technologies for 10 to 15 years, and so people tend to forget.
Correct. The trouble is, right now, India, China, and Russia are all developing the next generations of space vehicles.
Yep.
And they've all got plans in space long term, including going to the moon. China's laid out the goal to be on the moon by 2025. Now, unlike us planting 6 flags in the soil back in the 60s and 70s saying we come in peace for all mankind, and I do have a lot of Chinese friends, so I'm not being racist or anything else like this, but on a political scale, that's the next hill. That's the next mountain to scale. And if they put a permanent flag in the soil, under a negative political regime, then that's where they'll be. That's where they'll stay, and they'll start defending it.
Yeah, but okay, is the
Why?
U.S. really going to care? Because, well, yeah, exactly. But let's look at it from a defensive position. If they launch a missile from the moon, if they launch some sort of weapon from the moon, we'll just shoot that out of the sky days before it reaches Earth, right? I mean, it's not like it's a military advantage to be on the moon.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Obviously, singing to the choir, but I'm trying to figure out, using these technologies like Twitter and some of the social media things, how do we educate people and I mean, even our own chat room, how do we get the word out and kind of get that momentum behind Space 2.0 so people realize that this really is important stuff?
Back 50 years ago, the space industry as a whole was a few $1 billion worldwide in real dollars. Well, call it 60 years ago.
Okay.
Now it's trillions of dollars worldwide. If you take in cable television, satellite phones, the satellite industry itself, launches, everything else, it's trillions of dollars worth of business. That's where the mega bucks are going in the future, like it or not. Now, low Earth orbit, fine. You know, stick in low Earth orbit. But the problem...
Oh, we're good at that now.
Well, but the problem is, we're even backing away from that. 2010, we have no more shuttle launches after 2010.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, currently, that is the plan as of right now, yes.
Correct. Depending on what Augustine and his folks decide. His
merry men.
Yes. Yes. Don't get me started on that. But anyway. And then in 2015, 2016, 2017, whenever it is we decided now to deorbit what we've just spent $100 billion building. Come on.
Well, BZ brings up in the chat room a pretty good point. We can't afford to leave LEO due to the budget. We can barely afford to make it to LEO. NASA gets, other than military, NASA is the largest space entity in the world, with over 50% of the space budget going into NASA, other than military.
Right.
So if NASA can't get to the moon, what chance does China stand, or India, or JAXA, or Russia, or pick an acronym and throw it in there?
I don't think India is an acronym. But
well, no, it could be. It totally could be.
Let's make one up.
We could, absolutely.
Show. Let's make an acronym.
Go on.
OM is saying 2014. Mark his words. All right, your words are henceforth marked.
Got it.
What? I missed that.
I think he's saying that we'll be on the moon in 2014.
On the moon? No. Well, we could be if okay. Let's put it in 1960s terms.
Right.
Okay. NASA's budget in real dollars is the same as it was at the height of the Apollo program.
Yes, but you have to take into account inflation.
No, that's taking into account inflation. The entire Apollo program was $25 billion in 1960s dollars.
Oh, I see what you're saying. NASA's entire budget is just that of Apollo.
Well, it's the same as NASA's entire budget was back in the Apollo days, if you increase it in real dollars with inflation.
Okay.
It is. Okay. It's currently about $18 billion.
Yep. I think with the extra stimulus that passed, I just rounded up to 20.
Right.
Yep.
Back then, it was like $2 billion, $3 billion at its peak. So you're talking about a tenfold increase since then. So it's
I got to challenge that number, because I remember at ISDC we were talking about the grids and the charts, and they were pretty far off as to when you took into account. Actually, I'm going to ask the chat room to back one of us up, because one of us is right on this one.
Okay.
I certainly thought that it was nowhere near. Exactly. Fight! Finish him! I certainly thought that it was substantially less than what it was if you take into account inflation.
Okay.
Now, if you don't take into account inflation, then yeah, you're right. We're making this more at this point.
Right. Okay. Let's put it back in a. Even if the budgets are different than they were now, which could well be, between 1961 and 1969. Well, no. Pull that back. 1961 to 1960. No. My goodness me, I'm getting flustered.
You can do it.
1962.
I've intimidated you. Look at that.
God,
Look at
great.
that. Yes.
Typical
Wow.
Ben.
Wow. Ben scores another point.
Okay, wait, the chat room is talking about what percentage of the budget. It doesn't matter what percentage of the budget they got.
We're just talking about dollars.
Right, so if they made
Total dollars.
$2 billion in 1969
Right.
and they made $20 billion now, and you take into account inflation, how much, if you take into account inflation, what would our current budget be back in 1969? That's what we're at, right? That's what we're getting at. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
But between 1962, when Shepard was launched, to 1968, when the first flight to the moon went up, Apollo 8,
With
6.5 years.
yep.
And you had every Mercury flight, every Gemini flight, and you had 2 Apollo flights in that length of time. You started work on a launcher. The Gemini program wasn't even started for man rating at that time. And you completed the largest launcher ever built. The problem is now that we have so much red tape. This whole nation is risk averse.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the biggest problem. China and India are not as risk averse as we are.
Well, looking at this from a global human standpoint, then maybe it's time for us to hand the baton off to China and India. I mean, I would not like to see that. I mean, obviously,
Correct.
being a citizen of the U.S., I'd love to see us be leaders in this space, because once we hand that baton off, we are essentially ceding world leadership to whomever we hand that baton to.
Correct.
In my humble opinion. But I don't see how we can convince the American people that that's what's going on. I think they're just going to, you know, and they don't care. Like, what's going on in my world right now, no further than this. So how do we break them out of that shell and go, you know what? Your world's going to come crumbling down if you hand that baton over.
But I think you're right, Ben, because
Of course I'm
because Americans don't realize what we are doing to ourselves. We are reliving every empire that's ever lived.
Every empire has fallen.
Correct.
Yep.
I was born in the last great world empire. When I was born, it wasn't an empire anymore. But 100 years ago, in 1909, Britain had the largest navy in the world, and its navy was 3 times larger than any other navy in the world. So if it took on the next 5 biggest navies in combat, it would beat them. Now, that's a little old island in the middle of the North Atlantic, or just on the edge of the North Atlantic. And at that time, the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. We literally had colonies in virtually every time zone around the world. Now, Britain doesn't even class in the top 5 in Europe in terms of powerhouses. Is that the fate that the United States wants to give itself? To be in 100 years not even considered one of the top 5 powers on the globe?
So in your opinion, do you think that being a world leader will require a presence in space, a manned presence in space? Is that going to be one of the things or one of the leading things? Correct. Now, we're on a space show, so one would hope that you would answer yes. But
but you don't have to.
You don't have to.
No,
I'm just saying.
I absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
But what about those who would disagree? I mean, there are a lot of other issues. You could look at healthcare. We can look at. I mean, I've got a barrel of issues sitting right down over here that are never going to go away.
Right.
Why is space so important?
Back in the 50s and 60s, people were saying, why are we wasting all this money on space? It's the same old argument. Look at weather satellites. Just take weather satellites. Do you know how many thousands of lives and billions of dollars those have saved?
A lot.
Hurricane season. Could you imagine if we hadn't predicted Hurricane Katrina hitting into Louisiana?
Don't really want to.
Okay, instead of killing, it was bad enough as it was, you know, killing 1,200 people. It could have killed tens of thousands of people had we not been able to predict it.
Easily.
Tornadoes nowadays, and this is a tornado state, right?
One just hit Minneapolis.
Exactly.
The city, even.
Back in the 1800s, tornadoes used to kill thousands of people a year because there was no predictive system for it. Now, you're lucky if 10 people die in the whole United States every year from tornadoes. Property damage is still there because we can't, unlike Star Trek, because they had an episode where they stopped a tornado from hitting. And they did.
I don't remember that one, actually.
No, I'm a Star Trek nerd
I'm
as
sure you
well.
are. Yep, absolutely. I'm not going to argue with you. I just, yep.
Tornado prevention is done by satellites, space technology. Now that's, if we decided, oh, well, you know, we have to spend money on this hospital or this healthcare system or whatever the case may be, back in the 50s and 60s, we wouldn't have weather satellites. Now, people can argue, well, we got them now, why do we need more? Why do we need to keep going up there? But we don't know what's around the corner.
That's a very true statement.
You know, you cannot stop exploring, developing, researching, because you never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to cure. You never know what problem you're going to solve. Putting it into terms of Michigan, because I'm from Michigan, as we discussed earlier, where the tumbleweeds are blowing down the alleyways right now.
Of Detroit, yep.
Back in the 60s, Apollo employed 400,000 Americans.
It's a lot of people.
Exactly.
It's a lot of people.
High-tech jobs. Every single job was in high-tech industry, manufacturing, or research.
But hang on, we got the numbers back. They ran the math. 25 billion approximately would be, and so we're 5 billion off, would be the equivalent of $131 billion today. So, they would have had to have a substantially larger budget back then in order to, I'm sorry, we'd have to have a substantially larger budget right now to match what they would have had.
No.
No, I got that backwards. We got that backwards, didn't we?
If it was 25 billion back in the 60s, it would be 131 billion now.
Yep.
How much did the ISS cost us? 100 billion.
Yeah, but that's 25 billion per year. So 100 billion.
No, the Apollo project cost $25 billion.
Okay, well, that's a good point. So then, then 100 and, okay.
So,
okay.
We could have ditched the ISS before we even started.
Yeah, but it's politics too. It's not just money, right?
Absolutely,
I mean, it was a big Russian bailout. We wanted, to get the space station up. We needed to keep people employed, and we weren't looking towards long-term living in space. We were looking towards the politics of it. And maybe that's the downfall of NASA, is that it's just like you were mentioning, so red tape, so political, so risk-averse now. It's so ingrained into the culture. It's not that they're bad people. By any stretch of the imagination. It's just that I think it might be set up wrong. So what's the solution? How do we keep that here in the U.S.?
Another part of the problem is that we have a president comes in.
Yeah.
If President Obama decides to go back to the moon, or better still, to go to Mars, if he decided tomorrow to do it and said, NASA, here is $100 billion to go out and do it now, we could definitely get to the moon by the end of his second term.
Yep.
We could probably get to Mars pretty close after that, if not at that point. But if you believe Dr. Zubrin, we could be on Mars a week on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, but let's get real here. 10 to 12 years you could be on Mars if you put the budget together for it and the political will to do it. But the problem is that Obama only has a year to decide and a year to get it done and underway. Beyond a year, he's eaten too much of his first administration away, and he's still got to get his second election in. Or his replacement has got to be another Democrat who believes in the same things as he does.
Right.
8 years is not enough to do anything strategic, long-term, that isn't defense-oriented. Period. It doesn't matter what it is.
But that's not going to change. I mean, so how do we, can we fix that? Or do we have to look towards the SpaceX's, the Virgin Galactics?
Yes. I think the future of space flight and the future of space exploration in the near term, in terms of, or the near distance, I should say, in terms of low Earth orbit and eventually getting to the moon, which is a short distance.
Yep. It's right in our backyard, realistically.
Correct. Yeah. Is with people like SpaceX and Bigelow and all those other people. See, that's how I plan to be an astronaut, or
Have you booked a ticket on?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I need the money.
Yeah, I know. Same problem.
Yeah.
Because she's not going to let me go solo. So that's like $500,000 right there.
Yeah.
A little under, but
Yeah. Well, it's been one of my personal ambitions. See, back in 1972, when I got talking to my brother, he was the person who got me really interested in space.
Mm-hmm.
He was 7 years old when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. Perfect age to get interested. Yeah. So he had a scrapbook, and Charles had all these details and everything, and we just used to discuss it in our bedroom at night, falling asleep in our bunk beds. And I remember once I was about 8 years old, and I said, Charles, my brother, asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up, David?" And I said, "I want to be an X-15 pilot." And he said, "Well, there's two problems with that. One is you're English. Second is the X-15 has been retired for 4 years, so you can't fly it anymore." I was like, "Oh, well, I'll be an astronaut." He said, "Well, yeah, maybe you can be then."
My constellation prize is
an astronaut. Yeah, I'd rather be in the X-15, but
I'll go to space, I suppose.
Yeah, well, whatever the case may be. So I've been interested since that time, and it's just very disappointing that the long-term vision has been lost. Think of all the things we benefited from that burst of space activity in the 50s and 60s and into the very early 70s. Just amazing. The laptops and everything else I've mentioned came from that generation. Now, what is inspiring? What is the cutting edge that we are laying out for our current high school students, college students, graduate students?
Twitter.
Right.
And the iPhone.
Do another iPhone.
Well, I mean, it's a different, but everything's different now. Realistically, the world has radically changed with the advent of the internet, with satellite technology, and with our ability to instantly communicate with everyone. So the world is a much smaller place. Who's to say that one country has to do it all anymore? Why can't it be a worldwide effort? I know that, okay, I realize I've stepped into Idealsville, right? But,
Welcome to Oz.
Yeah, no, let's take an idealistic approach to it for just a moment. Why not? Why can't it be the entire world? It doesn't just have to be the US. This benefits all of humanity. Why can't everyone team up and try to make this happen?
And I absolutely agree with you on that one too. Being a European and being married to an American and living in America, the country of my dreams.
Welcome.
I think there is a very strong need for international cooperation when it comes to major projects like space missions, manned space missions particularly. The political things that get in the way, and they'll always be there. But let's have a bit of détente with China and maybe help them to get their astronauts into space. They've already got ballistic missiles that they can land warheads on Kansas if they want to anyway.
Right.
Because the moment a country can launch a satellite into space, they have that capability.
Well, that's why we're so worried about the
North Koreans and Iranians and all these other people. But that's kind of an odd thing too. It's okay for us to have all this stuff, but not for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're
because we're the good guys.
Right.
We're always the good guys.
Perceived so, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
When
right.
we make our own,
your perception is your reality.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're digressing onto another.
I'm good at that.
Hot topic.
Yeah,
Absolutely. But international cooperation, and it's already begun with Mars. Back to the next two rover missions are going to be collaborative efforts to certain extents. The Mars Science Lab that's supposed to be launched at the next window, which is 2013, I think. Now it's going to be 2011, maybe. And all my Mars friends out there, you can shoot me later.
And the window you're talking about is when Earth is in the proper trajectory, because the orbits, there's a certain point when Mars is very close to.
It's approximately every 2 years is the perfect time to launch.
Yep.
So that's why all the major Mars missions go up every 2 years.
Yep.
And so the Europeans are going to be involved in a small extent to that. The exciting mission, in my opinion, the even more exciting, is ExoMars, which is the European Space Agency's rover. It's even bigger than our rover.
Well, and you know, bigger is always better.
Absolutely. But it has a drill that can drill down over a meter into the permafrost.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the important part.
And be able to actually get samples down below the surface to examine what is actually living under there.
Why don't we just send humans there to do it? I mean,
I'd love to see that. that would be an exciting thing that you could focus the attention of the world on again. And this is why people like Buzz Aldrin are talking about it. Michael Collins mentioned it. Neil Armstrong mentioned it with the 40th anniversary stuff. Don't go back to the moon if you're going to use it as a stepping stone to Mars, because it's like, you know, going across the Atlantic for Christopher Columbus, but you're going to sail across, you know, the River Seine in France first just to try out your boat. It's a totally different thing.
That's true, but okay. I'm actually an advocate for going to the moon first, just for a little bit to test this stuff out. And you're right, the environments are completely different. They absolutely are. But at the same time, a lot of this stuff is very relevant information that we can gather. We know how to live in a space station, yes, but we don't really know how to live on a surface with things like regolith, the really hard stuff that's going to get in the airlocks. On the moon, it's a 3-day journey in case catastrophe happens.
Right.
That's survivable. I mean, okay, you lost your air, that's not survivable. But if something really went wrong, they can survive in bare minimum whatever for 3 days. Apollo 13 proved that.
Yeah.
On Mars, it's a better part of a year journey.
Yeah.
You're dead.
Yeah.
And you have one incident like that, we're risk averse at this point.
Yeah.
It just takes one incident like that to have everyone pull back really hard. So I'm actually a huge advocate of going to the moon first, simply because we need to learn this stuff and prevent the issues if we want to do this long term. And that's actually part of the thing with Dr. Zubrin you mentioned, Mars Direct, I assume is what you're referring to. I think the problem with Mars Direct is it feels a little bit like Apollo again, where you're building these big, huge rockets that are unsustainable, going up to Mars, and then that's great, so we'll do something for 3 years while we have the budget, and then it will just, all the money will vanish, and it's not a sustainable project.
I love it, because now the big, huge rockets going and not sustainable is NASA's plan to go to Mars from the early
I know.
90s.
I'm not saying NASA's plan is right either, by the way. I'm not a huge advocate of any of them.
Right.
I'm actually, I wax and wane and change my opinion daily. Right now I'm kind of thinking fuel depot, but stuff like that. Right. Thinking about how we can do this for less money, less time, less money, more bang for your buck, because that's what people will eventually demand.
When I was at the Mars Society conference last month and early this month in Maryland, Chris McKay talked about what he thought the growth of manned spaceflight should be. And he talked about landing on the moon, setting up a permanent moon base, landing on Mars, setting up a permanent Mars base, and having both going.
Yep.
But he also talked about, back in the 60s, the way NASA managed to keep people's interest was having firsts and records and new achievements and shouting from the rooftops. We don't have that anymore. Right. They just recorded 13 people on the space station. One more than it was before. Big whip. Yep. And the space station modified its orbit by another 15 feet, so it's 15 higher than it was before.
Slow down, my head's about to explode here.
Right. What Chris said, and I absolutely agree with this because I read an article on it in Air and Space magazine a few years ago, is go to asteroids, near
Earth asteroids.
Yep. Right. Then you can say, okay, the current record for manned spaceflight is to get 250,000 miles away by orbiting the moon.
Right.
But we go to a near Earth asteroid, we'll shatter that record by day 4.
Yep.
And we can go to one that's only
The furthest
half
humans
a
have
million.
ever been away from our cradle. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we can do an orbital mission. The first time, do an Apollo 8. Do an orbital mission, take photographs of it, say how beautiful it is, send another Albine up there who's an artist who can sketch the thing.
Yep.
Bring it down, sell those sketches on Earth for a few $1 million so we can get the next mission funded.
Brilliant.
And then we can go 750,000 miles away. And then we can do an orbital mission around a comet. Take a good, close, hard look at that. And then we can actually land on a asteroid and pick up some rock, bring it back with us. It's so easy to land on an asteroid. You haven't got a huge amount of gravity to deal with. You can just bounce along the surface a little bit and then take off. And
Well, we think, having never done it before, right? I mean,
Right.
it's easy to say that sitting here in a studio. I
Right.
mean, actually,
Well,
how would you like to be
1G.
there actually landing on the asteroid? You
Right.
know, you don't know what you don't know. So, all right. How can we advocate this then? I mean, there are tons of ideas. We can go on for hours with different ideas, and this is an interesting discussion to us because we're space geeks, but how do we convert the Carrie-Anns of the world, who was not a space geek, who is now a space geek, how do we convert them using tools like Twitter, using tools like Facebook, and I would say MySpace, but you know, how do we utilize these tools to start getting people interested in this stuff so they start thinking about it? They don't necessarily, I don't think they have to agree with us, but they have to at least start thinking about it and researching it and have an opinion of their own.
I think it's for older folk, like my generation, for them to realize what we're giving up, what NASA and the US government is in the process of giving up. To get to the ISS, we're going to have to depend on the Russians. We're going to have to depend on other people. We currently depend on other people for our oil supplies and certain sorts of food and certain sorts of materials and pretty soon cars and other things like that. Do we want to depend on everybody for everything else? This is one more thing, and it's the cutting edge technology that leads to other stuff. For the kids, and that's where you're going to make the most impact. The 5-year-olds to the 25-year-olds, give them something to be excited about. I did a speech in my son's 2nd grade class on the day that Stardust was launched. And I said, you kids will be in high school when Stardust gets home with a piece of a comet on board. And they were like, you know, 2nd graders, they were like, whoa.
Right.
Wow.
That's forever from now.
High school.
Yeah. Right.
And that is years ago now.
Right.
4 or 5 years ago since that happened. And they were just fascinated. And I said, do you want to see the galactic pizza? And they were like, what? And I held up a picture of Io. They were like, yeah, it looks like a pizza. And I said, you know what all these red dots are and black dots? These are volcanoes. They're like on Earth volcanoes? And I said, not quite. They're bigger and hotter and stronger. And they were like, oh, wow. And I said, okay, here's a picture of Io. And see this crescent? That's one of its volcanoes going off. It's that wow factor, grabbing their imaginations. I did another speech to when my son was in middle school, and they had me in talking about space, big mistake as always. The end of the presentation, I had a slide, and I said, okay, raise your hands if you're interested in any of these things. Started off photography, aviation, clothes design, art, graphics, computer science, programming, materials, construction, engineering, biology.
Just about every facet of your life.
Yeah, all these different things. And the very last one is being immortal. Living forever in the minds of the human race. And every kid and the teacher had their hands up.
I'm sure.
And I said, that's what you can achieve, and that's what you can get involved in if you get involved in space. They need all these things. Space is not just about astronauts. It's not about floating up in a tin can like Major Tom. It's about everything else that goes along with it. If you want to be at the forefront of fabric technology, be in the space program, because spacesuits are the forefront of fabric technology, and those fabrics eventually will go into everyday life. Where do you think Velcro came from?
Yep.
Well, kind of. Velcro, that's it's not fair.
Okay.
I got to pause that one.
No.
Everyone thinks Velcro is a
Okay.
NASA thing. Velcro's not a NASA thing.
Well, let everybody think that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's finish up. I have completely and totally ignored the chat room. Are they mad at me?
A little. It's
Okay.
okay. But they talked about the Mayans for a while they were ignoring you.
Well,
So it's okay.
that's fantastic. Did they have any questions before we wrap this up that we wanted to take care of? Anything that was in the back chat before we have awkward silence on air? We're good at awkward silence, by the way.
No, you just keep talking because that's what you guys like to do.
Well, seriously, we could talk about this all day. We've far exceeded the normal show length. So what we'll do is we'll wrap up the traditional show and we'll continue the discussion in post-show. So for those of you joining us live, we'll stay with us. We'll continue this show. For those of you joining us on demand, you can join us live next week, every Friday at 2 o'clock a.m. Coordinated Universal Time. For those of you in the U.S., because I know you can't do time zone conversion, that's Thursday night, 7 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Central, or 10 o'clock Eastern. And anything in the chat, or are they just?
No, I think they're good.
I ignored them for so long that they just went off and did their own thing for the entire. So there were, by the way, there were two shows. There was us doing our thing, and at the bottom, you'll have to watch the show twice. There's this entire chat going on that's talking about. So there are two shows in one. That's what you get with this.
Well, one final plug for the book.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Am I on camera?
It can be.
The book is available on Amazon.com and also BarnesandNoble.com. And if you happen to be watching from the UK, it's on Amazon.co.uk. It's also available in India, believe it or not.
Nice.
Wow.
But if you are interested in getting larger numbers, so you want discount quantities and stuff, you can always email me. Can I plug my email?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. The best way to get hold of me via email is hmsi@comcast.net.
Comcast, really?
Yes.
Seriously, Google Apps are free. You get your own domain name.
Well, I know. I do have a.
I mock our guests on air. You like that?
I'm trying to keep Ben credible.
Oh boy.
I do have a more complicated email address, but I'm going to simplify it right now.
Right.
Sure, go ahead.
So the hmsi at comcast.net
Yep.
is the easiest way to get hold of me.
And you have a few copies that are signed that if you buy it, you buy it tonight, Spacevidcast gets a little kickback, and you get a signed, not just a copy, but you get a signed copy.
Yes. What we're going to do is there's 6 copies which you already have, which are going to be prizes at some point in the future.
Yes!
Yes, they're signed by David, the author, and they're also signed by me because in the book.
What page are you on? 149?
149.
149.
Case study number 8.
Case study 8.
And then I have 10 copies of the book right now. I set up a thing on Eventbrite. So if you go to ttwb.eventbrite.com.
That's for the Twitter workbook.
Yep.
TTWB.
Correct. And if you buy it between now and Saturday, about 9 a.m. Eastern time, it's $20 on the website, $5 is for shipping and handling, and $5 will go to Spacevidcast.
Wow, because we're that awesome.
We are.
To help keep these guys going. Because we need this awesome way of delivering information about space in a good, friendly way.
I think we need multiple outlets. I think Twitter is certainly one of them. Obviously, we brought you on the show because you're a space geek and a Twitter geek and a new media geek, and this is all important because using these new mediums is a way we can reach people that we wouldn't normally be able to reach. And the more people we can get excited about this stuff to understand that the baton is slipping before our very eyes, and you're letting it happen, the more people we can open their eyes to that, I think the better. So thank you very much for being on the show. Stay with us. We're going to keep you around for post-show. For those of you joining us on demand, certainly try to join us live next week so you get the full conversation. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's how I'm going to be. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye.